Taka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ututa, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tiro, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, Māori ora. If I didn't already say it, welcome everybody to today's Regulatory Processes Committee meeting. Please let me or the Democracy Advisor know if you intend to leave the meeting. And we'll have morning tea, I think, at around 10:15 today, if that works out. I'm thinking that our first paper will be fairly straightforward. So do I have any apologies? I think we have one for slight lateness from Councillor Calvert. I'm expecting her any minute. Councillor Kelly is, Pauiwi Kelly is joining us online. And
I have to leave at midday, so hopefully we're done. But
lovely. I move that we accept those apologies for lateness and leaving early. Does anyone have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor McNulty will vote on those.
Good. So how do I vote? Okay, chat.
Oh, she's just arrived. Do you want to be removed for lateness? I don't know.
Oh no, I was here. I heard all of that. But I don't know how to do this
we didn't
on the
take
chat.
an apology for you for being anything but online. Thanks.
Oh yeah. No, I heard you say that. But how do I do that? So I'm a yes. I'll figure it out.
Just say yes in the chat, Liz.
All right, we've taken Councillor Calvert off.
Yes.
Be merciful. All right, we'll vote. You know, we do start promptly on time in this committee, however. All righty.
Take me off the mic.
So, and that is carried unanimously. Right, so we've done apologies. Conflict of interest declarations, do we have any? Doesn't look like we do. Confirmation of minutes. So I will move the motion that this committee approves the minutes of our previous committee meeting held on the 9th of August 2024, which have been put up online, and that they be taken as read and confirmed as an accurate record of that meeting. Do I have a seconder? Oh, the Mayor, lovely. I'll put that motion, which has been moved and seconded, and invite you to vote. And that again is carried unanimously. So we do have, there's nothing that's not on the agenda, but we do have some public participation. So we have 5 public participants and you all have 5 minutes, which will need to include time for questions. And thank you for making the effort to come, it's always appreciated. So I would like to invite Jose first up. Thank you, Jose. And I understand that you're from the Wellington Hospitality Group and the Courtenay Precinct. Actually, it looks like everyone is more or less associated. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Morning, everyone. My name is Jose Ubiaga. I'm a business owner. I've got bars on Courtenay Place. I've also got 2 bars that have just recently closed on Courtenay Place, being Rubik's Bar and Sugarwoods. I'm part of the Courtenay Precinct, and one of the big roles with that is we are trying to change the narrative on Courtenay Place. Now, I don't need to go into the decline on Courtenay Place because you've only got to walk down Courtenay to see how tough it is down there. But what we want to try and do, and we started at the beginning of the year with bringing buskers to the area, is looking at closing a couple of the streets, predominantly the New Year's Eve closure. And the big reason for that is just trying to bring a lot more life and vitality to the area. We want to get all the existing businesses around that area as well to be able to participate in a combined role in just working together and bringing some vibrancy to that area and making the New Year's more of an attraction, because a lot of the time everyone leaves Wellington. We want to try and make a reason to bring people to the city. Another part of that is stimulating the economy for those businesses around that area as well, because we are all finding it quite tough. And now's the time to kind of support those small businesses. It's about getting community engagement, bringing in local talent, local artists, buskers, all around the same time as well. And we want it to be not just about the late night, it's about a whole day experience. And and trying to bring people to the area that may not normally come to Courtney Place. We want to make it to be safe as well for that reason. We want it to be a bit of a tourist attraction for New Year's. Tourist attraction. What else have I got down here? One of the problems too is like the current deterioration down Courtney Place. This is a reason that can help change the narrative, and make people see that there's more going on in Courtney Place than hearing what they see and read in the newspapers. Because a lot of the stories that come out of Courtney, it's all negative most of the time. And what we want to do is start bringing out positive things. Right, I'll leave it at that. You guys can feel free to ask some questions.
Oh, that's wonderful. And we do have a question from Councillor McNulty.
Thanks, Jose. Big fan of what you guys do, and I think empowering you guys that have a real stake in the outcome of that street is exactly the right approach. So I guess I'm just curious. This is one thing today, but what other things could we be looking at as a council to help empower you so that you guys can really lead that rejuvenation of Courtney Place?
It's just getting a little bit of support from the council, and a lot of that is not. It's like because there's a lot of barriers that get put up with licensing and extensions of licenses, and when we want to try and do events and things like that, it's trying to remove some of those shackles and make our job a bit easier and allow us to be able to do what we do best, and that is hospitality and entertainment and livening things up. We can do a lot of it. We just need a little bit of support from council as well, especially when it comes to like road closures. A little bit of support with financially with that go a long way.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for coming in. I really appreciate that. Again, I'm a very strong supporter of your initiatives, and so well done. I find that a lot of what is happening in these places, quite often we don't know about it until we actually read in the paper. Like this morning, I actually read about some of the bars in Courtney Place. So feel free, if you have any questions, if you'd like us to become involved, if you'd like us to sort of look at an issue, please come and call us. And if you have any, do you have any issues that you'd like us to speed up on, or?
Oh, I won't have enough time to go into those issues right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
But thank you, Ray.
Right.
So a question from me, just around parklets, because they're coming up in a paper tomorrow, actually. What's your personal view on do you know what I mean by parklets?
I do. Which ones are like?
Well, it's just a program we've sort of got of an aspirational sort of number, a smallish but aspirational number.
I do have concerns about losing a lot of parking in the street. It depends on what the parklets are being used for. If it is definitely going to have a positive benefit for the businesses around those areas, then I'm all for it. If it's just a matter of taking up the park and putting a planter box and a bench seat there, I don't know if that's going to be a big benefit for the actual business itself.
Okay. That's useful because we are probably going to have a lively debate on it tomorrow, I think. Okay. But thank you. I think we're out of time for your presentation, but of course we've got some others coming up. So thank you very much. So Charlotte, Koata, online. And as I was just saying, it's 5 minutes. It will go by quite quickly. And that has to include questions if you'd like us to ask any.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And sorry I can't be there. I've got the lurgy, so I didn't want to get anyone else sick. So I just wanted to talk a bit about the current situation on Courtney Place, the downturn, and kind of what we're doing to help combat that. And while we're all hospitality here at the moment, that certainly extends to retail, daytime trade, takeaways, and all that sort of thing as well. So we certainly want to represent that group in what we're doing. With the road closures that we are hoping to get through for New Year's Eve, and also the Allen Street pop-up street performers as well, we see that as bringing people into the area earlier in the day. So we want to increase the foot traffic through everywhere. Retail, we've got Backhouse opening on Allen Street, which will be amazing for the area. Coffee shops, bars, restaurants, eateries as well. That's all going to be phenomenal for the area. We've seen huge downturn in our trade, especially during the weekdays. There isn't foot traffic in the area anymore. So we're trying to pivot our businesses and the area to be more of an all-day experience. So people come in, people enjoy something in the mid to late afternoon. They can come in earlier with their families, We want to make it all super family friendly. Yeah, that's kind of what we're aiming to do. We know that Courtney Place does need to see some changes, and we have done things as well that have had phenomenal change. We've introduced our own roaming security on Friday and Saturday nights. That's had great support from the police. That's had some really amazing outcomes as well, and they work really closely with the Take 10 people who were down in the old UFS pharmacy and outside Lucky Chicken. It will mean the world to the area to be able to do these sorts of things. We're seeing huge uptake in people coming to events and activations and one-off things rather than coming out all the time. So we think that events and a reason to come out is going to bring these people out again when they wouldn't usually. We notice with people's change in spending that they're coming out to specific things, like when we did Eat Street and when we did Road to Bevana, because it was an advertised event or a pop-up or something different, they were coming out to it when it would usually be quite hard to drag people out of the suburbs to those kind of things. And yeah, we're super pumped to be able to do these sorts of things, hopefully with council support. And yeah, that's me. That's my pitch.
Thank you, and we've got some questions already. Councillor McNulty and then Councillor Abdurrahman.
Hey, thanks very much for coming in today, Charlotte. With road closures, they're can be quite a large beast to overcome and to sort of step them up the first time. So I'm just wondering, are you getting sufficient support from council or being able to reach out? I don't want to volunteer to people from the Newtown Festival without them actually participating, but have you got resources just to sort of get this first one up and going so that you get into the rhythm of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the guys from Newtown Festival and Cuba Duper have helped Brett McCall out significantly with what to do. We personally have used Sam from hanging around before, and he's phenomenal. He's really easy to deal with, lays it all out for us and all that sort of thing. So that pathway looks really clear for us on what we're doing, and there's heaps of support from those other festivals on how we can really nail it as well.
Oh, phenomenal. Thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, my friend, and thank you for the great things that you guys doing. I used to drive taxi, and when the businesses in Courtney Place does well and the whole community do well as well, and it's great to see that vibrancy is coming back. What council help looks like to achieve more of what you're aiming to do, and how do you think you can get that support on top of what you're already asking?
I think that a huge amount of support comes from the narrative that council put out. So it can be little things, it can be resharing on social media, it could be a Facebook post from a public figure, it can be anything like that that's going to really change what people think about Courtney Place. We get so infiltrated with the negative stuff all the time that to have someone of stature, you know, anyone say, hey man, went down, had a really neat time, this is what they did, all of that sort of thing is going to be really beneficial. It doesn't always need to be massive, it doesn't always need to be in kind, it doesn't always need to be, you know, a really grand gesture, but just continuous support of the area is really amazing.
Thank you. I just will sneak a quick question in. What do you think is the main reason behind the negative narrative, and what can we do about that?
I think that the main reason behind the negative narrative is that it's currently louder than the positive one. I think that one of our downfalls as a precinct has not been to publish enough good stories of what we do. It can feel a bit like blowing your own trumpet at times to outline really small things, but they're not actually really small things. They're really great things that we do and that we do for the community. Like if you talk to people, if you talk about the history of the place, if you talk about community involvement, not many people would know that we sponsor the Wellington Lions and the Wellington Pride, and we sponsor Porniki teams, and we get out in the community and we do things where, you know, people might have one bad experience and that suddenly, you know, oversees everything else. Like all the good things that you do are kind of shadowed by that. So I think that we need to be prouder of what we do, and with the right support from the agencies as well.
Oh, that's such a good answer. I really appreciate that. Right, well, sorry, but we have run out of time.
All good. Thank you.
So we'll move on. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Jill Watson. And you've probably got an idea of how this rolls.
I'm looking at the clock.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So, kia ora councillors, kia ora mayor, kia ora council officials. I'm Jill Wilson. I wear two hats in talking to you. I'm part of the Inner City Wellington Residents Association, and I'm also a local resident of the Courtenay Precinct area. So just to quote our chairperson, Stephen King, who couldn't be with us today, he was asked about the hopes of the New Year's Courtenay Place Street Festival back in August, and he was reported in the Post as saying, Inner City Wellington Residents Association chairperson Stephen King believed residents would support the idea. There's very little happening at New Year's in the capital, so if we could have more things to invite our community to be part of, that's a positive thing. The Buskers Festival, or Street Performers Festival as we now call it, had been well received by lots of people living in the Wellington's inner suburbs, and we know if there are more events on offer, our residents will come join in on the fun since it's right on their doorstep. So our patch, Inner City Wellington, is Tiaro, Wellington Central. We say it's the biggest residential suburb. 17,000 people, we believe, are crammed into our little footprint. Probably in one of the 125 plus apartment buildings in the inner city. So this is their patch where this is intended to happen. We recently were part of or joining some of the conversations that took place around the planning of the Buskers program that was concluded recently. And I was watching the crowds. I was quite intrigued to see what people were thinking about it. And we also ran a little humble survey, and I thought this might be quite useful to hear some of the comments from residents around that event, which I think would translate to the street closures and events we're talking about today. So, 11 comments. I know, not a big one, but still. They liked the Buskers program. They said it's a great idea, gives the place a buzz, as well as providing a platform for some of Wellington's amazing musicians and performers. Other people were asked, what kind of thing did this bring to the inner city? I believe in the potential for this space in the city to be activated, and this sounds like a rad way to do so. So I thought that was quite a useful perspective. More businesses, more people, more revenue will increase the activity in the area, and everyone will receive a share. So there was generally a positive. One interesting comment, someone said, I get the brand Buskers program and Courtenay Precinct Plan, and then Inner City Wellington, and it gets confusing to me. It would be good to have some sort of unifying identifier, like a logo or naming rights to the whole thing, ideally by a major sponsor. Maybe that's council, I don't know. So that person was thinking they're a bit fragmented, so bringing together some of the messaging under maybe a longer term ability to describe what we're trying to achieve. My own observations, there were children down in Courtenay Place on Friday night and Saturday night. That surprised me. If you read the doom and gloom news, you wouldn't think anybody would take children to Courtenay Place, but they were there and they were enjoying the music. I saw people dancing. I saw people coming together, a small group becoming a big group. I saw the Chinese Dragons parade and the Chinese Lions parade, giving people smiles everywhere. There was a sense of wonder and delight. These are the sorts of things I think these kind of programs can achieve. And as a local resident, I want my part of the city to cheer up a bit. Everything's closing around me. I could take it personally. I'm not going to. The doom and laden news in the press, it gets us all down. We need some good news stories. We need life, energy, and confidence back in the area. I think that's what this sort of event can do. And back on my ICW hat, we're quite happy to help communicate to residents these events, the background, the reasons why, including an avenue for them to provide us with feedback, to say what they think, that we can then take on board, feedback to the events organisers and also to council. Thank you very much.
I'm going to sneak in with a bit of a controversial one. Do you think councillors sometimes add to the negative stories? And we could do more to lift it.
Pick up what Charlotte said is I think that we do need almost red socks for the inner city campaign. We're so used to reading bad news, and there's more of it in the paper today. The good news stuff doesn't get out there, and I think that's what we need, and I think council has a part to play in that, Red Sox made a boat go faster once. Well, what can we do to make the inner city feel proud?
I knew it would be a slightly controversial one. There you go. Councillor McNulty has a question.
Just quickly, I think you're getting so many questions, the group collectively, as a reflection that we actually as councillors don't really hear directly from you. This is one of the few chances I can think of. So one of the things that immediately comes to my mind is there something warranting the establishment of a business improvement district like we have in Tawa, like we have in Johnsonville, KRL, within the CBD, so you guys have another vehicle to come directly into council and we can hear a bit more from you guys? Do you think that's something that would be generally supported?
I attended, I think it was a business bids session at the convention centre, Takina, recently, and I thought what was missing, to be honest, was the community involvement in that. I think the language of business, and I think these guys are good business guys, they really are, and they're community minded. But I think we're missing a little bit in action, the residents' associations. I mean, there's 20 plus residents' associations in the city. We meet every month through Zoom, but we don't naturally get invited to something with the label business. And I think we should. And then one of the benefits, I think, of my being able to sit in on some of these meetings is I've discovered this business group are really amazing people. And you heard that from Charlotte, Jeremy and the gang. They're community-minded, so we need to get these two organisations together. So I'd be worried about the term business not including community.
I take the point that we don't often get to speak to this group, so I'm going to be lenient and let you have a question. But appreciate if it's concise.
Thanks very much. Very quick question. We know about the Inner City Wellington group. So is there another Inner City Residents Association? Is there a TRO one or does that...
No, we're TRO Wellington Central is us. We have our colleagues in Mount Victoria, our colleagues in Oriental Bay, our colleagues in Mount Cook, Thorndon. We're all distinctly different in terms of the residents in our areas. But no, we're Wellington Central and TRO, 17,000 people.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, so we have come to the end, sadly, but thank you again. Greg Wilson, welcome, and you're from the Epic Hospitality Group in the Courtenay Precinct again. Thank you.
Well, it's official. Courtenay Place has lost its mojo. My name is Greg Wilson, and I'm involved on the Courtenay Place Revival Committee. Also own Epic Hospitality, which owns Vinyl Bar, Shade Lady, St Diablo, Eva Pub, and El Barrio on Dixon Street. I was also involved in the Wellington Pride Festival for a long time, and have been involved in producing large-scale community events, including out in the square, out in the park, at Watingi Park for several years. I'm passionate about our community, I'm passionate about our business community, and I'm passionate about Wellington. Now, the current economic status of Wellington, not good. Wellington hospitality has been gutted, right? It's been absolutely gutted this year. Many businesses are reporting that it was down between 30 to 50%. What we do know, though, is that people are coming out for events, and they're coming out for occasions. We have to create those events, we have to create those occasions to get people out, right? That's our job. We've got to hustle more at the moment to get people out. We've got to turn around this negative rhetoric that's happening. Far too often, Wellington's featuring on national news every night. Oh, doom and gloom in Wellington. Oh, doom and gloom every night, right? We've got to turn that around. Our number one goal here with these street closures is to bring people back to Courtenay Place, to help revitalise Courtenay Place and help businesses survive to 25. Where there's people, there's money. The people have got to come back in with their money to help these businesses survive. Number one, Allen Street Party. It's a community-led, vibrant street party, right? Stage, street performances, student bands, bands that have played in the Courtenay Place Street Performers campaign will be invited and given the opportunity to come and play on the stage. That's going to help music careers in central Wellington. We're the creative capital, right? So we need to create that opportunity for younger talent to come through. And this leads back to supporting our community. We would like to see this model on street closure repeated. We want to revitalise the area with regular activations that attracts thousands of people. And as a group of business people, we're always looking for systems for success. So we want to create this framework and do it again and again and again and again every year. Yep, it's going to be a template for future activations as top of our list. The council have installed bollards at the end of Allen Street, or about to, that will rise out of the ground and help these street activations be a bit easier from a management point of view. So the council should be commended for that work. Regarding New Year's Eve, we want to close it down from Cambridge Terrace to Tory Street. Next year, we want to do the whole street. This year's a bit of a tester. Give us the shot to do that. We want a proof of concept. We can show you what we can do for this area. Again, New Year's Eve, community-driven event. The more people we bring in from the community, the better and richer the event becomes, right? We've been overwhelmed with support for this initiative. We've got the Wellington Residents Association on board, as you've heard. We've got the local music community on board, the rainbow community. We've got cultural communities coming to us who are really keen to be involved, the Latin community, Asian community, just to name a few. So it's going to have an early evening focus, street-activated outdoor dining, encourage licence areas to spread out onto the street. We've met with Judy, the boss of the liquor licensing from City Council. She's been really supportive. We're working with her on that. Look, we're experts at creating environments for people to have fun in our businesses. We run bars and pubs. We've done it for years, decades between us. So we're really good at this. This is a larger scale, but we need your help to be able to make this happen. Safety is really important for us as well, so it's time. Safety is really important. We're going to have controlled entry points into this area. We don't have that every other Saturday night in Courtney Place, so that'd be great to be able to help us manage the street. It's going to be an alcohol-free event, and a couple of minutes to go. We're also really well supported with our events and operations expert, Kathy from Cooper Duper, who will speak after this as well. We've also got Martin Hanley, who's come on board as an advisory role, and he's involved with the highly successful Newtown Fair. The other thing while I'm here as well, we're just a bit concerned about the future of Courtney Place. It's really important for hospitality. That we have a great, thriving Courtney Place. We've got concerns about the cycle lane and the disconnect between the outside areas and the cycle lanes and the loading zones around the street. We really want Courtney Place to be the blueprint for future success for hospitality. The blueprint for future success for hospitality. So we've got this in our palm of our hands right now. The council have this in the palm of your hands right now. We need to make sure we also get that design right for Courtney Place so it can be useful for the future life of Courtney Place. And finally, I really want to say, look, it's amazing what a whole bunch of great people can do when we all come together. We really hope with your support we can bring back Courtney Place, mojo. Happy to take any questions.
So we're almost out of time, but because Councillor Rogers hasn't asked one, I'm giving him one shot.
Yeah, I had to change my question because you already asked it about Allen Street, but it was particularly around, this committee spends a lot of time looking at road changing plans and approving them. And I was wondering, from your perspective, this blueprint that we want to create, how important is it that we think about how we could facilitate street space being used, for more of these events everywhere?
Yeah, really, really important. For example, at the moment in the plan, there's the licensed premise, there's a footpath, and there's a cycle lane going through it. When we have licensed premise with a footpath going right through the middle of it, it's almost useless to us. It's useless to us. I built a parklet on Courtney Place outside Vinyl Bar and Shady Lady. It can only get liquor licensed till 10 p.m. And even then, customers, our staff, have to carry over one beer at a time across the footpath, which is useless. So customers come here from around the world, around Wellington, and they're like, oh, this is weird. I've got to carry my one Corona across I've got to get a staff member to carry the Corona across the footpath. And then at 10 o'clock, oh, everyone's out, that's it, we've got to close it. So it makes for a useless outside area. Here's the thing, with outside areas and parklets, as business owners, we'll pay for it. Just give us the space to do it. Don't put a big footpath through the middle of it because it's useless, because when it goes to liquor licensing, the police, they won't allow it. They just simply won't allow it. So the outside areas must be connected to the front of the premise. So we need you as a council to look at that drawing and say, look, listen to this. This is going to be the future for hospitality. And if we don't get this right, if you have a big disconnected outside area with a footpath going right through the middle of it, between the licence area, it's useless to us. And the future of hospitality relies on this, because there's empty tenancies on the street right now. They need to be converted into restaurants and bars at some point. But if you've got useless outside areas, they won't. They'll stay empty. We'll have homeless people sleeping out the front, and you'll see more of what you've got. So, yeah, let's take that on board.
It sounds like there's a lot more conversation we could have on this.
There is, yeah, absolutely.
That's my takeout from that. But you were saying that parklets are not particularly, or not as useful as they could be because of the separation.
Yeah, they could be great for businesses. They could be great for the area for adding atmosphere.
Yeah.
But the problem is, at the moment, we've got on the plan that's been presented to us is a big footpath in between the outside area and the licensed premise, which makes that outside area utterly useless.
Okay, all right. Well, that's interesting. It's feedback for us.
Thank you.
I'm not sure how far down the track we are with that one, but thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So, did you say someone was going to, I've got Jeremy down next, but did you mention that a lady was?
No, Kathy's here to support any questions.
Right, okay. But Jeremy, it's your,
So just
the floor is yours.
Just to say, because I'm representing HNZ, Trinity Group and Courtney Place Precinct, I think I'm entitled to 10 minutes if that's okay.
Sorry, we might have to start again. We've been a little tiny bit distracted and I don't want you to miss out on your turn.
So I'm just
we'll put it back to 5.
I think I'm entitled to 10 minutes because I'm also got a member organisation, Hospitality.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, as I said, I represent Hospitality New Zealand, Trinity Group, and I'm the coordinator of the Courtney Place Precinct team. I want to try and wrap up a lot of the messaging that our guys gave today, and maybe Anna is aware that I do quite like my mantras. So I want to start with a couple of mantras that are critical to how we operate. The first one is collaboration, working together for a common goal. And I think we need to continue with this process because without collaboration, we get nowhere. The second one is good intentions are a complete waste of time. It's the outcome that's important, and we need to actually focus on the outcome and not on the intention. We want to work with that rare breed of yes and people. Yes, and I can help you here. Yes, I can support you, as opposed to the majority who are yes, but people. Yes, but there's a problem. And an example is this process started in April around talking about the street closure. It's taken us all this time to knock down the barriers of what should have been a sensible decision and a process a long time ago. And the most important mantra for our team is failure is not an option. Our livelihood, our staff's livelihood, our businesses, our investments, everything rests on us surviving. And at 63, I don't have time to start again. So this is why we are putting so much energy and effort and passion into this, because we know if we rely on other people to do it, we're going to be disappointed. We know that Courtney Place in Wellington is in trouble. Yes, it's economy. Yes, it's working from home. Yes, it's lack of investment in Courtney Place over the last while. But I think the other part is overly officious regulation application of rules. We've heard from the other guys, the police are killing Courtney Place with their trying to shut places down early. You know, Sugarwoods could not survive if they say you can have a 3 a.m. license Sunday to Thursday, but midnight on Friday and Saturday when it's your busy time. Some of the liquor licensing side, people are looking for problems that don't need to be solved. So the question we need to ask police and liquor licensing is, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and is this approach going to solve that problem? 15% of alcohol is consumed on premise, which means that most of the drinking is happening outside, and yet we're the ones that are getting targeted. It has to be a collective approach of sitting with police, sitting with liquor licensing, saying, these are our standards, these are what we're going to do. If the operators aren't doing stuff properly, let's work together to fix it. But don't drag us through court. These guys have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting the police in court to get what our current LAP allows. So if we want to work together, that's an area we need to do it. So it is a three-legged stool. It's the Courtney Place Precinct, it's Wellington City Council, and it's our regulatory environment. Linked to that as well, you know, coming up to the rugby this end of the month, I'm hoping 10,000 people come into Courtney Place. And if we do things right, we will. But no one's saying, you know, you've got to have extra things around special licenses. No one's saying you have to have extra police or you have to, extra security. So when we do these road closures, we need to look and say, how different is it from business as usual? Let's make it simpler. Let's make it more cost effective. You know, $20,000 to get a road closure seems excessive. There's easier and better ways of doing it, especially if we're going to rinse and repeat. We need to look and say, let's not try and find problems. If there's a problem, let's after the fact address and say, let's not let that happen again. But let's not try and anticipate that people crossing the road are going to be more stupid over New Year's Eve than they are during a rugby game type scenario. That we don't necessarily need all these other costs and factors built into it. So anyway, we formed the Courtney Place Precinct because we had to do something about ourselves. A couple of key things. Big thing around city safety and the perception of city safety. So where we're working there is working with police, doing training, but the other one we want to introduce is possibly following Auckland's example of putting a bylaw in place that looks at our culture. So our message is, you want to come to Wellington City, we've got standards. We expect you to behave in a certain way. And we empower the police and council to basically say, listen, you're intoxicated. You're not welcome here tonight. Here's a trespass notice. Go home, come back when you know how to behave. And if you want to give us some lip, here's a $100 fine, just to remind you that maybe your behavior is out of order. We want that ability that if people choose to sleep on the street, we can say to them, look, it's not cool in our prime street. We can move you on. Yes, we need to work with housing. We need to work with charities to try and address that. But having 10 or 12 people sleep outside St. James is not a good look for our city, and that is part of the problem. The perception is the city is not safe. If you've got people that live in emergency housing that aren't employed, they're drinking during the day and making a nuisance of themselves, we need to be able to address it. Now, a bylaw can do that, and it just so happens ChatGPT and our team have drafted one using the Auckland bylaw as an example, and I'm more than happy to share our ideas. It's not a big stick, but it's just giving people power to do what is sensible and what is right. So city safety is critical. Street cleaning is important. There has been a big improvement, but there's still a lot of improvement around making sure our streets are clean. The next one is the urban beautification, better lights, painting buildings. The Golden Mile does come into that. And as Greg said, is that currently the way the design that's been presented to us is not for purpose. Our businesses will be worse off once it's done. And why would we go through 3 years of pain, disruption, and possibly closure to end up with a solution that is no better than what we've currently got? The key things are the cycle lane, the outdoor areas that need to be connected to our business, the ability for deliveries to be made close to our businesses and access through, ability for tradesmen to access businesses, the ability when eventually the landlords start doing earthquake strengthening that they can do so reasonably simply, and the ability for taxis and Ubers to get to people easily and they don't have to start wandering down side streets. If we can address those four, I think we can work together, and we want to support it. And we're more than happy to work with Chamber. If we can come up with something we say, yeah, we support, we're happy to go to Simeon Brown and Co. and say, listen, let's rather keep the funding in place to build something that works as opposed to building something that's a dog and we can't support. So I understand the challenges of funding and all the rest of it, but there's no point in throwing money at something that's not going to work. So anyway, then the activations, the nighttime economy starts at midday. We need people in coffee shops. We need people enjoying that component. We need people comfortable walking around. We need a bit more retail. It then flows into the after-work drinks, the pre-show bites to eat. Then it's into the theatre, cocktails afterwards, and then our late-night people come in. If it's tumbleweeds going down the street before the late night comes in, we've got a problem, because that's when you've got more homeless people, and it's a disconnect between what we've got. So there's got to be that good flow. And a lot of what we've been trying to do with the buskers, with the Eat Street, is trying to look at starting earlier and supporting the businesses that need it.
So Jeremy, just to let you know, there are a few questions I've got noted. People want to ask. Yeah.
We've sent a proposal to around St. James to try and reactivate that. It might be busy behind the scenes. It's a closed facade. Let's get the coffee shop going. Let's get a cocktail bar going. Let's do more events in there. I know the Academy of Fine Arts is quite keen to have exhibitions in there. We'll do buskers. We'll work with the ballet. It can happen. We can liven it up. We can get cruise ships, passengers through. It's an iconic part of our street, and it's now basically home to the homeless, and that's not what we want to see. The other guys have spoken about the reason why we want to do street closures, and absolutely proof of concept, and let's find ways that it's a streamlined, easier process. Well, I think we've spoken about parklets and various other things. In terms of funding, where can we support? Anna and her team have provided us just enough rope to hang ourselves with, but we want to do things properly. So I've been very lucky that we've got quite a bit of money out of Matt from Wellington Airport, Anthony from Centreport, Gilmore's have given us money, our suppliers have given us money. So we've raised our own sort of $100,000. We're getting money from council, but if you look at the street closure process is $20,000. It makes these things quite expensive. So yeah, we want support. I think Wellington NZ should be coming to the party more, and I'd love to look at how we can refine their budgets. I do want to acknowledge and thank Anna and Brenda and her team. It's been an interesting journey, and now we're working incredibly well together, and it's very much a sign of that partnership. Yeah, I'm not good at taking no for an answer, so we do get things done at the end of the day. So yeah, thank you to these guys, thank you to Brett, because again, these guys are putting hundreds of hours in of their own time outside of trying to run their businesses because they care, it's important, and our city's worth investing in.
Okay. Councillor Calvert hasn't had a question to my knowledge, so you're on the list. We won't have time for everybody on the list, sadly, but sometimes how it goes.
Thanks, Jeremy. So do you think with the opportunity of trialling these street closures will also give an opportunity to see how best it works for the hospitality places to establish themselves out the front of their premises? So, because we heard, I think it was from Greg, about you got the footpath and then you got the parklets. So you've got that disconnect. Is there an opportunity with the street closures to sort of bring those together more?
Well, down Courtney Place at the moment, there's not many parklets. There's a couple, but not many. Most of our businesses are directly onto the business to have that direct connection. What the street closure allows us to do is push our liquor licenses right up to the pavement so people can be in the venues and enjoy the music, enjoy the entertainment. They don't just have to be standing in the street. So that allows us, I mean, this is all about generating revenue for our businesses. And we're doing it, and it's a long-term plan that we've got to start with concepts, and second year, third year, when we want to do a fan zone properly, because the fan zone's been a bit of a failure, and we can go to the whole discussion about that. But it's around driving people into our businesses, and you do that by activating the streets and getting people in, and then they come in. That's why Courtney Place street closure is so important. Push the barriers out, and then people can sit in our venues and enjoy the live music. With Allen Street, slightly different. We're bringing people into the area, then we've got to work out how we get them in earlier so they can dine first, and then flow them out into the venues afterwards. Because again, having live music down there is great, but unless it comes in and we generate revenue in our businesses, it's not a success.
Thank you. I think we probably have run out of time, but oh yes, okay.
So this is just sharing. So at the last meeting of this committee, you talked about rinse and repeat. We approved a proposal with the Newtown Festival organisers, which would allow them to basically have 6 months of rolling road closures. So it's definitely something we've considered, and that's something we can work towards as well. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and then they did point that out to us only after we put our application in.
Well, we want to see how that actually plays out. So, but yeah, hopefully it will be successful.
We're able to, Cuba Duper and the guys, we're all collaborating and working together, and we're slowly getting building owners into the mix. So slowly but surely our group is getting bigger, and the influence is felt more, and we're learning from other people.
Yeah, well, thank you to all of you, and Jeremy, thank you for this presentation, but thank you more generally to everybody, because I feel as if we've been quite well informed, and I think we were favourably disposed anyway, but it's good to have all the information that we've received today, so thank you. We will move directly to this paper, I believe. It is first on our list. So nā mai Sean Wakaka Maria Taumo ki te hora I te kōrero. So please welcome everybody, Sean and Maria, to introduce the report.
Thank you. Kia ora, Madam Chair, me whānau, councillors. It gives me great pleasure to bring to you for your consideration a request for 3 road closures. So the first is actually a repeat event that we've had, and that's the Brooklyn Community Festival, which is to be held on Saturday the 19th of November, and that's going to be on Harrison Street. We've had no objection to this closure, and again it was a repeat festival, well attended and well enjoyed by the local Brooklyn community. And then we have 2 road closure proposals, both based out of Courtney Place, which you've just heard quite a bit about. So the first being we have the Courtney Precinct New Year's Eve street party. So that, curiously enough, will be held on New Year's Eve, so 31st of December. And then we have a closure proposed for Allen Street. And that is the Allen Street Block Fest on the 16th of November as well. So we're more than happy to take any questions you may have.
Right, questions. So we've got Councillor McNulty and Councillor Abdurrahman.
Yeah, just a quick question with 3D New Year's one, 6 a.m. Is that, is that early? Sorry, is that late enough? I just imagine there's not a huge amount that's going to be happening on the 1st of January in that precinct. So is 6 a.m. enough time, or is there a bit of flexibility, or not needed?
Potentially, there may need to be some flexibility required. When the street is returned, it'd have to be returned in a cleaned and useful state. So, in terms of discussions with the organisers, this is what was proposed. There's been a bit of talk about sort of setting a bit of a model going forward. This will probably inform kind of the time required for future events, but we believe that with what's been discussed, 6 a.m. is pretty realistic.
Okay, so it's not worth us maybe making an amendment just to 7 or 8 a.m. just to be safe?
I don't think that it would necessarily be required, but yeah.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. I recall when Corny Place was really vibrant, especially around Rugby 7 time. But the challenge at the time as well was health and safety, how some people just, because of the number of crowds, the big intake of alcohol consumption as well. Is there any plan in place to make sure that's not going to happen to ruin the whole avenue? Because this is a great thing, but we don't want it to be the little things to ruin it.
In terms of liquor safety, alcohol safety?
Yep.
So that, I believe, will be part of what the organisers will have in terms of their risk management health and safety plan. For our unit specifically, we deal with the operations of actually closing the road. So we do understand in terms of what the health and safety is around keeping attendees safe, and that generally means separated from moving traffic as well. I do believe the organisers will address that though.
Cool, I think that's a message for organisers, but is there any support that the council can provide them? Because this is not an easy thing that can just left to them, and the whole street needs to be managed to some extent. Is there any voluntary wise, or is there anything that council can do in a way?
That is probably something that I'm sure that the wider council may be able to refer to. I'm not aware of anything. There's certainly nothing that
I can probably add to that. So where we've had closures previously, we have facilitated meetings with police and organisers as well, just to make sure that that risk management is actually where it needs to be. The onus is still on the organisers to do that risk management piece, but we can facilitate that so that the police are across it as well and comfortable with it.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got Deputy Mayor Foon.
Kia ora, mine's just an administrative question. Number 2, it's saying Saturday the 19th of November for the Brooklyn Community Fest, but then the next one down is talking about Saturday the 16th of November for Allen Street. So I'm just checking have you got the correct Saturday, and if so, I'll let the chair sort out getting that corrected. Kia ora.
Okay, thank you. That's well spotted. Which one is correct?
Apologies, can confirm
Okay,
6.
we'll just make a note that that's to be an editorial. We'll just fix that now. And thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. Are there any other questions, or shall we move to debate? Thank you very much. I think we've been pretty well informed, so we'll all move to debate. Now, would somebody like to move this? Councillor McNulty.
I won't speak for long. I just want to thank everyone for coming in this morning, and that to the chair just giving it extended time. I think, everyone here deeply concerns about the state of our city, and we all might have some different views about what's driving or what to do there, but hearing from people on the coalface, so to speak, is the most important thing we can do. So that extended time this morning, really thank you. It's been illuminating. I just remember back at the Tākina Bid Summit last year, and we had Graham Salt, who was a British expert that rejuvenates town centres in the UK, come in and talk, and he said, I kind of came in with my big, how does government do this? How does council fix this? How do we lead on it? And one of his big reflections was the people on the coalface that need to be the most invested in turning their communities around, and then it's where we can come in and support that. And I think this paper is the absolute best example of that possible. So just want to say thank you for the efforts. Please do come and keep talking to us. I'm sure we can get something running like we have for the Wilson Street closures in time that will let you guys get a bit more certainty and bring some vibrancy. And, you know, I love taking my almost 4-year-old into town. It's actually one of the more fun things to do for a day trip on the weekend when there's nothing else. And I look forward to having things in Courtney Place that will bring us in too. So I think that's all that needs to be said, but thank you again, and yeah, really just happy to move the paper.
And I believe the Mayor would like to second it, so do you want to speak now?
Yes, please. I just want to say that I wholeheartedly support this paper. As Councillor McNulty has said, as Council, we have to pull every lever that we can to help these businesses, especially in this economic struggle that we have. And we know our hospo industry has been hit really hard. Thanks to the Courtney Precinct team for your passion and also your collaboration with our council team. This is exactly a great example of us needing to work together. You know, Jeremy and Greg in particular, we hear you loud and clear. And Greg, you know, I still appreciate your emails, so please keep going. And I completely agree with the narrative issue. We need to push. This is a great story that our hospitality industry has pushed, and we need to get in behind it. I know we'll be very willing to help. Keep up the direct contact, and we'll do what we can as councillors as well as council. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so I have Councillor Rogers wanting to speak.
Yeah, I was just firstly going to say, Greg, although you might have said that the mojo is dead on Courtney Place, I think you definitely brought the mojo of Courtney Place to the meeting today. So I'm quite excited about approving a road closure, which is fantastic. And I also just wanted during this debate to, I guess, recognise the success of the busking events that have already happened on Courtney Place, but also some of the work that our team is doing around making it easier to produce activations. In particular, the raising bollards in Eleanor Street are one of the things that I'm thinking about. And having spoke to businesses who are kind of like even on the Tory Street side and have little side streets that really love to close off and activate, it is, I think, really good to see us thinking really critically about what streets are for and how streets can be used in the ways that businesses want to support themselves and to support the community to come out and enjoy something like an event. So I'm really appreciative of all the work that the team has done to bring this, especially through what can sometimes be quite a painful process. But I do promise you we are working on making that process less painful, and hopefully you can come back and say the process has been less painful when you go for another closure next year.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, look, I appreciate not many people are still here around this table there who were here in 2020, but we ran something similar. We did a test case when we were coming out of COVID, where we closed Courtney Place on a couple of weekends, and I led that with officers, and we didn't get many people out as we'd hoped, but it actually, I think hopefully that sort of also ironed out a few issues that this latest closure won't have to deal with, and especially around where do you put the buses. But I think it's a really good opportunity for us to see how we envisage Courtney Place actually really working before we invest many more millions into how we think the streetscape should look, because I think at the end of the day this is about people, it's about the place, and it's also about the businesses, because if we don't have businesses we don't have an economy, and if we don't have an economy we can't afford to do what residents expect us to do. And so I'd just like to also call out a lot of the community groups that do provide a lot of support for these events, which aren't funded either through their own businesses, are often coming cap in hand to this council as well. And I think that's where we can also think about how we can support directly. And I've got one organisation in particular, Take 10, which I think does a fantastic job. They're all volunteers, so nothing to take away from the businesses, but I really want to do a shout out to those guys as well, because I think it's important that whatever happens, it is holistic, it is all joined up, and we make sure that in promoting one group, we don't forget about another group as well, that it's all enabling a much better experience for everyone. So I will be supporting these. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. Absolutely, I'm supporting this because I know what it means. It's not only for those businesses, it's for the whole community. As an ex-taxi driver, every time when Corny Place is busy, that is our happy day as well. So I think that is a great thing to bring it into. The other point I would like to highlight is, again, there are a few who can also ruin those kind of activities. As an ex-taxi driver, some of them, when they come to your taxi, the level of abuse sometimes you receive is just like insane, and I think that needs to be addressed, and the council should put every support that we can so that can be more successful, and those kind of people can be sent home a bit earlier, so they're not going to cause to the whole program in the future a bit of uncomfort for the community. But I welcome, this is great, and we will support you more. Newtown is leading again, that's great to see as well.
Yeah, so I just want to say I'm also very supportive of this, but thank you very much for the input that we've had today from the business community and the Inner City Residents Association. And what struck me actually was how much of a collaborative effort this is, and how you've been building the connections and clearly working together for a goal here, a really important goal. And thank you for the work you're doing your work that you're doing to revitalise this part of our city. And I think we've all got a great responsibility as politicians to speak positively and to help, not hinder, what you're trying to do. So I very much took on board the messages about the negative, the negativity. It hurts me to see all this negativity, and we all need to look to see where our part is in raising the conversation and lifting optimism and supporting the people who are doing the right things. So a challenge to myself, and I hope wider than that as well. Just thank you. It really resonates with me what you're trying to do for this area, just in terms of giving it a bit more identity, a bit more energy, and as I said, just lifting it to where it should be. It's a great part of our city. I think I see Councillor Chung's hand was up as well. Did you want to say something? And then we'll have right of reply.
I actually had more questions to ask because
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, so, but I'll go and talk with you directly if I can.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. We right of reply to the mover.
Incredibly quick one, just to accept my apologies for number 3. I will be in a hotel by Sydney Airport on New Year's Eve, not having fun in Sydney with 2 small children asleep because I have an early morning flight back to Wellington on the 1st, so gutted to miss it, but I wish you all the best of luck.
Is that a right of reply? I suppose it is. Okay, well, that brings us to the vote. And then we can have morning tea. Liz, do we have you online for voting? Okay, we might just manage without Liz. I think she's trying to attend a funeral. Right, well, that was unanimous for the ones that are here. Thank you very much, and we will break for morning tea. We'll be back at, does anyone mind if we make it, 10 minutes okay? 22. Okay. Now, can I have everyone actually looking like they are part of the table? Okay, so I'm now going to move to our second paper, which is the Wadestown Stage 2 Walk, Bike, Bus and Traffic Management Improvements, a traffic resolution approval, and I'd like to invite Paul Barker and Moana Maki to the table to introduce the report. So now Paul Barker, Paul and Moana, would you like to join us at the end of the table? Yes, we do. I've incorporated the latest version of the amendments that you and I have sort of worked on into the, yeah, okay. Would you like a? Okay. It didn't turn into a huge amount of writing, so I don't know that we need it printed off. Okay. Thank you. And I see we've got Jacob as well. Welcome, Jacob.
Good morning, councillors and me whānau. Just before I start, just to acknowledge the wider team that's been working on this wider Wadestown Connections piece of work. It's been a huge number of people involved throughout the city design team. I got Jacob with me this morning. He's replaced Elise Armstrong as the project manager, but she did an immense amount of work building up to this. I also want to acknowledge the engagement that went into the project. And that's engagement on part of from our team here in the council and the community. Lots of people from the community came out and gave us lots of tips early on in the process, and then quite a large engagement throughout the consultation. So look, the project's made up of 3 separate projects that were all linked, so we've grouped them together so that the community only had to engage with us once, but they're all quite distinctly different, but common enough that it made sense to actually do it all at once. So those 3 parts was the traffic safety and access, and that was in response to FENS and the ambulance and other emergency services that were struggling to get through parts of this area. Residents parking scheme, and I'll talk a little bit about that going forward, and then improvements for walking, biking and public transport. So while it was useful to group all these together, it just made writing the report really difficult, and I acknowledge that the report probably could have been better, but it's just difficult to try and get all those 3 components all into one report. So first off, I'll just address the Wadestown Connections Walk, Bike, Bus proposal first. So stage 1 now is mostly in place, and that's the uphill cycle lane from Thorndon, comes through Park Street rather, and up through Wadestown Road, up to the top of the hill, up to the Wadestown shops. And then this proposal in front of you was for stage 2, which was to mirror stage 1, and it was to do an uphill cycle lane from Churchill Drive, up Wadestown, or Lake Bridge Road, up Wadestown Road, back up to the Wadestown shop. So that was the second part. And for the reasons outlined in the paper, we're recommending that we defer making a decision on this at this time, while still acknowledging that it's still an important part of our strategic network, and it's a link in there that will go unconnected for the time being. Then coming to that safety and access and the fire and emergency. So in February 22, the infrastructure committee that was then acknowledged the need to develop a program for fire access routes. And while FENS acknowledged that a number of roads in Wadestown are all difficult, so anything that's narrow was difficult to get access to, they actually pulled out and sent us a list of several streets in particular, and the likes of Barnard, Fernhill, Fitzroy and Hanover streets are all part of that list, and that they specifically said they have difficulty in. So Wadestown will be the first suburb that we address this fire and emergency access routes, and we're doing that through this paper. And some of the standards that we adopt today in committee will use those standards as our standard operating procedures as we go through suburb by suburb, addressing the narrow, heavily parked streets throughout the city. So good practice would be to provide that minimum 2.9 metres from parked car to parked car. And that's only one traffic lane. It's not for cars to pass each other. So 2.9 is still incredibly narrow, but it does allow a fire appliance to safely traverse the street, acknowledging they still have to go quite slow even at 2.9. Where we think we can make a difference perhaps is in the allocation of the parking at each side. So the consultation we went out with was to allow for that 2 metres of parking each side and saying let's set a minimum curb-to-curb width of 6.9. So Office is working with our colleagues in our Transport and Infrastructure team and Brad's team, accepting that on our quieter side roads that we could perhaps reduce the parking width from 2 metres down to 1.8 metres. So when we paint the white parking bays or the L bars, we'll paint those at 1.8 rather than 2, and that would allow us to get the curb-to-curb width down to 6.5. So we're seeking approval through this paper to perhaps to move to that as our new standard, and we would adopt that and roll it out across the city, still keeping that 2.9 for the middle. And I talk in the paper about which sorts of streets that would affect, but we haven't gone as far as actually doing the work to understand how many car parks that would give effect to. The third part of the proposal is introducing a residence parking scheme. The parking policy describes what a residence parking scheme looks like going forward, and it looks like the scheme we introduced in Newtown and Berempore recently. So it's a time-restricted except authorised except authorised vehicles. So we've moved away from calling it residence parking. It's a time-restricted except authorised. Now the Wadestown East scheme, that was the demand for that sort of been long acknowledged. We've had residents there asking for residence parking. Effectively, they were asking for an extension of the Thorndon zone to come back up into those lower slopes of Wadestown. They were experiencing commuters coming into those lower slopes from Thorndon, walking to and from work, and then further up Wadestown Road, parking around the bus stops, including up by the library. So commuters would come in, park adjacent to the bus stop, leave the car there, either walk or bus into town, or walk and bus back to their car at the end of the day. And that meant the residents that lived in that area, if they were to go out in the morning, their car park would get snaffled by a commuter, and when they came back there was nowhere close to their residence to park. So a residence parking scheme of this new nature would address that. But up the road further in Wadestown West, and that was to the west of Pitt Street, not so much commuters in there. Our surveys showed that there are some, but the bigger issue was really just a lack of parking. There's more demand for space than there is space, and with the fire and emergency access requirements of us removing some parking through there, it's going to further exacerbate that demand for space. So there, the main issue is about residents and their visitors competing with their neighbours for that space, and that's a 24/7 problem, not just a Monday to Friday problem. So we're recommending through here that we adopt a 7-day-a-week scheme, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m, with 2 hours being able to be parked in. So anything after 2 hours, you'd have to be authorised. And given that we think that's the right answer for Wadestown West, we then followed through and said, well, the logic would be to get some consistency across that we'd want Wadestown East to also be 7 days a week, although acknowledging that the main issue in there is a Monday to Friday commuter problem. We heard through submissions, including those that came and spoke to the committee, that there is still pockets of residents competing with their neighbours, even within the eastern area, so reinforce the need for a 7-day-a-week scheme. There is, I just want to comment on the new substantive that's going to be put, which is to stage the rollout. So the proposal that's now coming through, that we'll see shortly. So thanks. So amendments 14, 15 and 16, the new substantive. So what we're understanding from that is that in number 14, we would agree to put in all of the safety and access restrictions in the early part of 2025. So it's expected that the yellow lines be painted through February, March next year. And we would introduce at the same time, we would call for permits for those that wanted to apply for a permit in Wadestown East, the lower slopes. And we'd have that all rolled out in sort of the second quarter of 2025. And then the number 16, we would not introduce the parking scheme in Wadestown West for a further 6 months. And then the comment there is that in that 6 months, we would just monitor to see if it was a problem, and if it was a big problem, we could try to advance the introduction of it, and if it wasn't a problem, we would let it go. So that's the intent of 14, 15 and 16. Our concerns there, and I just really highlight to the committee that there is a cost in that. So we're bringing contractors back twice. We're having to call for people to register their interest in applying for a permit twice. So lots of letters out, lots of work for our processing people. We also believe that the problem is there now in Wadestown West, and that by painting the markings in early in 2025 will exacerbate that current problem. And if that does prove that it's needed, it'll still have a sort of almost a 3 to 6 months to turn around to actually get those signs, markings, call for permits, process the permits, and commence the scheme. So we're not going to be in a position to be terribly agile and do it any quicker than what is proposed for 16. So it was more a comment, and I'll leave it at that, and we're open to questions.
Thank you very much. Right, well, I do have a list of questions. So, Councillor McNulty, Councillor Abdurrahman, I saw the Mayor's hand, and Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, I'll just go through this round, and if you can put me back. So I have a little bit of a vested interest just because there was a press release that said I am proposing a new rule that no stopping lines be applied to streets that are less than 6.9 metres in width. Which was news to me that I'm doing such. So some clarification around the widths is my line of questioning. The initial design of the project, what you've worked on, and the amount of parking that you have therefore provisioned has been based on a 6.9 metre standard. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've applied the 6.9 standard where we could, and we've also applied some tracking curves. So it's not just 6.9. There will be places where it might be wider than 6.9, but given that it's on a tight radius or a bend or a curve, we've recommended that we take out more parking to safely negotiate those curves and bends. But generally, 6.9 was the standard we used initially, and I'm proposing through here that if, with leave of the committee, we could reduce that to 6.5 on straights, on those quieter side streets.
So that feeds into the second. So after site visit, particularly Councillor Randall and I up in Upper Pitt Street, you took that feedback and you've now developed the new 6.5 metre standard, which will allow for more parks to be provided than were there when initially proposed at 6.9.
Yeah, and look, in a quick desktop study, and it really was just a quick study, just measuring using the Google measuring tool. We think there's quite a few car parks that would be able to remain, but we haven't done the work. We haven't spent the money to actually go and do the detailed work. If approved here, we would then do that work.
Okay, cool. That'll feed into my next round a little bit. And can you just talk about how the FENS standard and approach has been developed? Because there's some confusion with some in the community around that we had a 6 metre standard apparently, so I just want to get some clarity of how did we land on 6.9 stakeholders, and then obviously we've come down to 6.5 from there. I mean, is the 6 metres news? Or,
the 6 metres news. The only place when you said that, FENS New Zealand, or FENS, have a document that talks about fire access to sites, and it's generally within a site of what they want is clear access. So, and it's a guidance document for road controlling authorities and private developers, and they really talk about a 6 metre clear zone, not 2.9. They want 6 for the fire appliance.
Okay, awesome.
So that's the only standards that we could find for operating a fire service in New Zealand. We have adopted the 2.9, which is the 2.55 maximum width, and their very largest vehicles will be sitting at that. That's the maximum permissible width on a New Zealand road without having to get an over-dimension permit. Cool. So 2.55, and the allowance to take it up to 2.9 is not much clearance down the side of a large car. So 2.9 is the standard that we've been using for some time, and we wish to continue to keep that standard.
Awesome, thank you. I'll go in the next round, please.
Just a little process question from me before we go to Councillor Abdurrahman. So I've been listening to Councillor Calvert and the community, which is why I have agreed to this amended substantive. But should 16 fail, I'm not sure where I'm not sure exactly where the numbers will go. Does that just mean that we will revert to the officer advice as it was originally in the paper, or do we need to foreshadow something to return to your original proposal? Maybe you can come back to me on that.
Yeah, yeah, it's more a process one, but it's.
Yeah.
Doesn't it go back to 12? So 12 is adopting the traffic resolution.
Oh, okay. So this one would be like
And in the paper, it talks about the next steps. That
Okay.
We would introduce the entire scheme in April 2025.
Yeah.
And that's tying them with when parking services are able to have a window in which they will be able to process the permits that would come from this area. So that was
So
our
if this
intent.
were to fail, we wouldn't be left directionless as far as you're
So as long
concerned.
as if
Yep.
12 was approved and 12 is the introduction of
Okay.
the traffic resolution to give effect to the parking scheme, then we would introduce the parking scheme as we originally proposed.
Okay, as originally, but this one just gives 16 gives an extra layer of instruction on top of that. But if it fails, we go back to what was originally
We would
proposed.
roll it out in one go. Yes.
No, that's fine. Sometimes I worry that when we do things, we'll end up with a completely perverse outcome. Right, so sorry about that. We'll return to the order of speaking that I've got down here. So that's Councillor Abdurrahman and then the Mayor, and then Councillor Calvert and Councillor Chung.
Cool. Just quick question on the first one, I missed it. What is the current standard? Is that 6 point or 6.5 or 6.9?
So the standard we applied when we consulted was 6.9 metres from face of curb to face of curb, and that allowed for 2 2-metre parking bays and one 2.9 metre lane.
Yeah, but we don't have generally standard, just as it's only when we consulted for this project, right?
We're looking to adopt the standard and apply the standard. At the moment, it's just we see some of these streets are well less than 2.9.
So this will set the precedence for other areas, right?
For other areas, that's correct.
So we never had previously a standard.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and what is the implication of this, and how many streets will be impacted, and do we have any, any research being done what it means?
We have a list from the fire service of the streets that they have highlighted that they have issues with, but we would have looked to apply the standard across the city, and that work has not been done yet.
So do you think that is better time to do it than if we don't have any information about those streets and we're setting a standard now?
So you want to jump in?
No, I mean, the width of a fire appliance is the width of a fire appliance, regardless of what streets are on that list. So that's what we'd be basing it on.
Okay.
Okay. One more question.
Yes, but
sure. Yeah, it might be coming as an amendment, but there is a resolution in here about using a funding allocated to one area for another. Since it's mentioned in the Berhampur one, it looks like the funding was just less than what expected, about 350,000 less. And the Island Bay one seems to be costing more when the timing difference is not much. What is happening there?
It's more of a Vita question, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I know Vita is online, but she's not well, and I think she'll answer that. Look, that's a little bit outside of the remit for me in this paper. I have been told though that there is some funding from those two projects joined together. The contingency that was set overall has not been fully exhausted, and so we are expecting some savings to be made out of those projects. The recommendation in here is that any savings that are found in those two projects, and again that's contingency, so it's not taking elements that we propose to do away from Berhampur and Newtown, Berhampur and Island Bay. We're still doing what we said with the community we would do. It's just that we haven't spent the contingency. This paper is proposing that anything left over from those two projects be spent in Wadestown to do some traffic calming.
Fair comment. And so do we know how much the placemaking in Wadestown will cost compared to the unused budget, maybe from 100K to 200? How much are we expecting to use for the placemaking in Wadestown? What is that placemaking we're talking about though?
So we'd have to look into that once we know what budget we have left from Island Bay and Burrampore. I've sent you some suggested words for the amendment, which reflects the fact that we don't know how much money we're going to have left over from Island Bay Burrampore contingency, and also we need to work out what those placemaking measures to create traffic calming in Wadestown would look like. But that's still work that's yet to be done because we don't have a budget yet.
Can I just comment there that we're just also acknowledging that stage 1 approved funding for the cycleway includes some minor traffic calming in Wadestown Village, so there will be some that we put in as part of stage 1, so that's not affected by decisions today, and that's the 2 pedestrian crossings in the village looking to be raised, and there's some other minor works to happen in that area.
Thank you, that's useful. Right, we're going to move to the Mayor.
So you mentioned before with the addition of 14, 15, 16 that might bring back some cost. Yep, and so with the amendment number 7, which is requesting a transfer, so is that going to impact, how much will that impact that extra cost that the other, I'm just seeing how they tie in together, you know?
Yeah, slightly different budget. So 7 was around placemaking around our community centres.
So they don't affect each other.
We were effectively using the community centre upgrade money, the town centres, to be consistent with that. So there's the 7 that's been put up there. So that would be ring fenced for traffic calming. The additional cost to monitor the scheme and to roll it out, that would come from the parking budget.
Okay.
And what we're suggesting there is that we would absorb that cost out of the overall envelope for parking that you've set through this LTP, and that's effectively the future project may not happen, or there'd be less money available for it. So we'd roll forward to do this extra work.
Okay, yep, thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, so I think you just might have mentioned it, but when we put the on some of the streets with the parking, are we putting, when we talk about white lines, are we talking about those parking spaces? Because one of the feedback was that sometimes people don't necessarily park as close to the curb as they should, and having the sort of the white car spacing lines encourages them to do so.
That's correct. So where we would have one of these new P120 parking bays, they're required to be fully boxed, so that has a full white box around it, perpendicular to the curb at the boundary and then parallel to the curb along its length. Okay. Where we don't have time restrictions, we use L bars, so we just indicate the proximity, and we're suggesting through this that we'd paint all those at 1.8 metres out, so that it encourages people to park closer to the curb.
Okay, all right, thank you. And one just about the traffic calming through the village, because this has been an ongoing issue for Wadestown residents for a number of years since the 30k speed zone limit was put in. So you're saying that there may well be some traffic calming which could actually really help. Is there an opportunity to go back and review whether that was sufficient, whether it's meeting the community's needs? Just because obviously to come back to say we need some money spent, but we don't actually know what we might need. So I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity for this committee or in another mechanism to say, look, we need to go back and look at whether the traffic calming through the village is effective with the structures that have been put in or not? And how do we do that? I mean, because I just want to make sure we can get Wadestown Village working effectively in terms of any speed going through there.
So the proposal I talked about from stage 1 that we're going to implement, that's more towards the top of the hill. So that would certainly give some traffic calming effect for vehicles travelling downhill, coming over the brow of the hill at Pitt Street and then coming in. It does very little to address the speed of vehicles that are approaching the Wadestown Village from the other end.
Okay.
So if we were to use the 7, which is the additional funds coming back from Burrampore and Island Bay, if they were to be spent there, that's certainly wider interest to try and affect traffic calming and to affect the town centre more. We also note that we're recommending to relocate the 30 km/h gateway at that south end. So that was as proposed, well supported for a consultation. So that's the only real change at this stage from traffic coming from the west.
Okay, and just another question before I go back on the list is, I mean, we did hear some concerns from some of the Wadestown businesses, and in particular the medical centre, about where their staff could park, especially if they're not a resident, so to speak. Is there, and the 120 minutes may not be sufficient for them. So, is there anything that we could do, and whether we've done this in other places, but sort of key personnel to be able to park nearby?
Well, we do note that with now recommending deferring the cycleway, that the parking that was to be removed from Wadestown Road will remain. Right. And that's the unrestricted spaces. So there is now a significant amount of unrestricted space that would be available should the approval in the paper go through. Yep. So there will be, and those aren't proposed to be the P120 except authorised vehicles, so they will at this stage be unrestricted. Okay. In terms of allocating on-street space dedicated to authorised areas, this committee instructed officers to investigate something similar for the users of Wellington Hospital, and so there is a traffic resolution will go out early in the new year to look to reserve space on Meehan Street for the exclusive use of Wellington Hospital staff, but they are paying, or the suggestion is that they would pay for that. Right. So effectively a lease scheme. That would be the first time we've done that in Wellington, but that could be looked at here for Wadestown if the medical centre was interested in paying for
could we look at sort of being entitled to residence parking? Sort of if there was a residence parking scheme introduced, is that something that you could allocate so many parks to, say, like the medical centre to take up?
I mean, by leave of the committee, if the committee wished to do that, instruct officers to do that, that is something we could do. To my mind, there's no real difference between the hospital, where we're asking that they pay for it at a rate of $18 a day. So.
Well, I think residence parking is residence parking, and these aren't residents.
They are the commuters that
okay.
the residents are complaining about.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm putting myself on the list for a couple of quick ones. Number 7, Councillor Nuruddin has obviously got some ideas, which I think have some merit. But I think I heard maybe that it's possible to do something about the parking in Island Bay out of a different budget. So we wouldn't necessarily need to touch this placemaking budget to achieve that.
I wouldn't be able to guarantee
You can't guarantee it, no. Okay. Okay, no, we can't guarantee it. Okay, you've got another confirmation on this side. Would one of the advantages of our amendment to have a bit of a monitoring regime, would one of the advantages be that you might decide a different proportion of restricted parking was needed in Wadestown West, given that we're not proposing a cycleway anymore? So 50% might be able to be reviewed. Would that be maybe one of the advantages of a bit of monitoring?
Yeah, and I think that is the wording of that gave that intent. We would review just how much we put in. If the yellow lines went in for the no stopping and it seemed to be working generally okay in most areas, and a couple of hot spots, we potentially could just pull right back to something that would just address the issues. Our advice, though, at this stage is that we think all of it will be a problem, but if this carries through, we will monitor and implement what we deem to be necessary.
Okay. And the cost, there will be an extra cost. Is there any sort of...
I haven't quantified that cost, but it will drag out the project. Our project managers will stay with it for a further 6 months. We'll have to re-engage the contractor to come back. I said our parking services team will need to mail out again. We'll need to process permits at another time. So, and then ongoing, we will then have the 2 Wadestown areas running at a different cycle.
Okay. All right, that's obviously something to weigh up. Thank you. Right, next on the list is Councillor Chung, Councillor Randall, and then I'm going to Councillor McNulty and Councillor Calvert for seconds. I'll put you on. So it's Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks. So I've got a few questions, so I'm quite happy to just do part of them and then go back on the list. That's okay. Talking about the parking bays that you're looking at, you mentioned about you're going to paint the lines at 1.8 for the L lines. Okay, so does that mean that if a vehicle was wider than that and it was over the that L line, would they be prosecuted? Would they receive infringement notice? Because again, I've also noticed that when we were going around Wadestown, that some of the vehicles were actually over the lines and away from the footpath. They weren't as close to the footpath as they could be. So this would be an incentive for them to actually make sure they are, or if they have too big a vehicle, they should park it somewhere else.
You're testing me on legal. To my mind, the parallel line is a guidance line, so it's not an infringement, but it does become an infringement if the vehicle is parked so far off the curb that it's blocking the lane. That becomes its own issue. So it's not in relation to where the white line is. And when we're there, we're talking about the parallel white line. The perpendicular white line that indicates that 1 metre from a vehicle entranceway, if you overhang that and you are then deemed to be within that 1 metre of a vehicle crossing, that is an infringement. So
95% of vehicles
yeah, so 85% of vehicles should, or they're pretty close to, fit inside that 1.8.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's great, thanks. Looking at Blackbridge Road here, we've got down in paragraph 56 that that's excluded from the Wadestown West areas, right? It's outside the Wadestown West. So is that you still propose to actually carry out paragraph 56? Not.
No, so in Blackbridge Road, the only parking restrictions we proposed in Blackbridge Road related to the introduction of the uphill bike lane. With deferring the uphill bike lane at this point in time, we're not proposing to make any changes whatsoever to Blackbridge Road, and they were always excluded from the Wadestown West parking scheme. So they can continue to park on Blackbridge Road at no cost. So they won't need a permit. They can just carry on their current activities.
Okay, thanks. Now, just to clarify, when we were there looking at the top of Blackbridge Road, we were looking at the intersection around there, and so we were looking at widening the parking areas in, is it Welton Road, where it joins up with Blackbridge Road. So that would still be continuing? No. Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Randall and then Councillor Rogers.
Okay, thank you. I'm very interested in the standards that you're establishing. So, and I've been working with, as you're aware, working with Fire and Emergency for a fair while on this. So, thank you very much for establishing this. So, first question is, you talked about a normal and a narrow standard, and I mean, are you looking at both of those? So, you're sort of saying, because you're really setting a bit of a precedent. So, you're sort of saying that if the road is narrow, you'll look at narrowing the parking space guidance to encourage people to get further off the road. But if the road was wider, you would still do the 2 metre sort of normal standard thing.
Yeah, I think that the 2 metre normal standard allows for people to have their mirrors extended and not have to pull the mirrors in when they get out of the car. And we've talked about the narrow side roads, but of course our main roads, generally we're looking for 2 traffic lanes, not a single 2.9 metre lane on a main road. So they are really about our narrow roads.
Yeah. Okay, look, I think it's great. Just in terms of it going ahead, I was wondering whether or not what you're really doing is a trial of a standard. You've sort of established that you need a standard in response to fire and emergencies requests, which I agree with, and so this is where you're trying it out. I was wondering whether you would comment on whether perhaps it would be useful sometime after it's established or sometime in the near future when you have these standards more rounded out, and I know there are other standards around speed bumps and pedestrian crossings that are also being looked at, whether it might be useful to bring a paper to council just to bring everyone up to date as to how you're establishing a consistent way of building roads.
Yeah, sorry, just So we are introducing the Wellington Design Manual, which is our document that holds all our standards for things across the city, and we would look to try and bring that into there as a standardised approach to how we allocate space within the lanes.
Oh, okay.
In terms of bringing, so we would have that in there. In terms of bringing the next suburb or the next street, we could then make reference to the experience we've seen in the rollout in Wadestown. So we would certainly use this as a test case. Whether we need to bring a specific paper and a report back on how well Wadestown's gone, I suspect it'll come through in either in adopting the design manual or bringing forward the next paper. So I think there'll be certainly reference to how well it's gone next time it's up.
And just a last thing, just in terms of saying that fire and emergency say they need at least, and obviously they need probably more most of the time, but they need at least 2.9 metres to get there. There's the absolute minimum for getting their fire trucks through. Would that potentially establish an infringement criteria to say that if a car was parked such that it was not leaving a gap of 2.9 metres on the lane, that could be construed as an infringement? Or would you just have to wait for a fire truck to get stuck and then ping them?
I'm not sure that this would adopt that as a legal instrument that we could enforce. We'd have to take some legal advice on that.
I just wanted to make sure that so that drivers have good guidance, so they know what good looks like.
Effectively, we would have to reinforce it with the yellow lines, I think, to give. So the yellow lines would give effect to that 2.9,
right.
And then the infringement is parking on a no stopping area.
Okay.
So as we start to roll it out across the city.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, my particular question was, what do we normally do with underspends on projects?
We just absorb them, essentially. So just, yeah. So
occasionally.
Do have them.
Sometimes.
Occasionally, yes.
Yeah, because I guess my question in this context is around if we're specifically redirecting this underspend to a project that wasn't, I guess, prioritised against the LTP, whether that would normally go to perhaps paying off an overspend so that the overspend didn't have to take on extra debt.
Yeah, so generally you work on, if you're working on a big program of projects, you expect them to be unders and overs, and hopefully to even out.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Now I think we're back to seconds. Councillor McNulty, Councillor Calvert, then Councillor Abdurrahman.
These are just a few that have come up from the meeting the other night. So you've sort of alluded to it, but I had an email from a Hanover Street resident who's gone out with the tape measure and gone, okay, with 6.5, we definitely can fit two sides. So just to confirm, you'll go out and remeasure streets from what's been initially proposed before any implementation, including Hanover Street?
That's correct. So, so the process would be is that you would approve all of the no stopping restrictions because we haven't gone through and removed them. But so if you are in mind to adopt the 6.5 standard, you approve everything, but we would only implement those that complied with that amendment and your recommendation. So we would go and remeasure them.
Yep.
And if it was 6.5 or greater, we would keep parking on both sides, even if the no stopping had been approved through the TR.
Perfect. Hitting send on a response now. Another point that came up was in Weld Street between 54 and 58. I believe we were implementing two parks and a residence advert, but essentially you wouldn't be able to turn around at the end. You'd actually have to reverse out of that street. So just after a bit of clarity and whether we need to look at any minor changes in there.
Yeah, we looked at, so the residents in consultation brought up the fact that to use those two parks to get out, you have to turn around in a private flattening area or a flattened car park area.
Yeah.
We're reviewing that. I think it's something that we can definitely pull out if it's an issue. We did feel because there are residents who live there and have visitors who could use those parks that providing that facility is a good option, but it's, we understand the concern there.
Is it worth just a minor noting amendment, just that you're still reviewing that situation, just so we can say, look, this was something tangible that came out of that? If I was just to draft note, officers are reviewing.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll draft something and send it through for move of the substantive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so we're now at Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, we might, I don't know, we need a little omnibus of that. But the other one was just on individuals was Wadestown Road, where some of the, I think we talked about some garages are quite narrow, are being classed as an off-street park, but are not necessarily wide enough for an off-street park. So just, I know there's something mentioned in the papers, but just whether there's any, do we need further clarity around that, or in terms of what width is actually required?
Yeah, I've had some correspondence with Councillor Randall specifically about what constitutes an off-street car park and what doesn't. It came up initially in the Newtown and Berempore scheme. Yeah. We acknowledged there that there was a piece of work officers needed to do to actually understand what constituted an off-street. Discussions I've had with my colleagues in transport and infrastructure, we believe we have a process that we would be able to apply equitably across the city. We haven't been tested in Newtown and Berempore. Everybody that has applied for a permit there has received one, regardless of whether they've, because we have, at this stage, we haven't hit the cap. If we were to hit the cap in Wadestown, those that would have an off-street car park would be the first to miss out on a permit, and so we would be tested there. The thoughts at this stage, and we need to adopt this internally, but my thoughts around this is that the district plan constitutes what is a car park for a new build. And so if somebody wants to provide or is required to provide a car park, we set out the dimensions of that, and that's in terms of width, length and height for a garage. And then separately from that, a safety assessment would be made through our safety engineers within the traffic traffic operations team, and they would assess its safety. So we would do that for a new build, and I'm suggesting we use that same process to evaluate an existing garage to see whether it was big enough and it was safe enough to use. And if we deem it not to be safe or not to be big enough, we'll call it a shed and not a garage, and not give it the status of having an off-street car park, and they would be eligible for a permit. We need to run a process around that so it's very clear and equitable and evenly applied, and I've made reference to that in the paper. I'm happy that you could make it an omnibus amendment to the recommendations, but it's something that we have to do anyway. We will be challenged time and time again unless we have our processes lined up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and I might just talk to Councillor McNulty, even though he's walking out the room, is that, maybe we just put a noting that officers are looking into the process for what constitutes an off-street parking space.
And really, we need to have it in place by April next year.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's just really just being explicit, just to give some comfort to those who've raised it.
What we don't want is our parking services team processing the permits for them to be having to make a judgment call as to whether that's a shed or a garage.
Right. Yeah. So there'll be some clear rules around that. So just in terms of this amendment, number 16, so what we're really saying is we'll put it in the east, but in the west we'll still be doing, we'll still be putting in the lines where the roads aren't wide enough. But then we'll see how it goes with, and then at whatever point, if it's deemed necessary, we will implement the residence parking schemes for the west.
That's my understanding of the way 16 is intended, unless there's very good reason to. So we would, leave it this, we would implement it 6 months following the east, so west would follow 6 months after east, unless it was a real significant from the chair, a real problem, in which case we would try and speed it up. My current thinking is that we couldn't do it much quicker than 6 months anyway. 3 to 4 months would be a real push, and we would have to drop other work in our program to bring that forward. But it also goes the other way in that if we are monitoring it and it appears to be working okay without a scheme, we then could not put the scheme in and leave it with the new status quo.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we're up to Councillor Abdurrahman for a second go.
Cool. Just following up from Councillor Carver's question, that was actually my question. So is that a hope now for some of the Berempore residents who previously big time requested for this, the old parking, old garage considered as a garage but not small, too small for the car, to be considered to have a parking, to qualify for parking?
Yep. So we would certainly have to resolve that for Berempore when we started to decline people that had a garage. We haven't. Anybody that has a small garage now still got a permit because we haven't reached the permit cap. So every applicant that applied got a permit.
But policy-wise, it's something that you want to look at it.
We will need to resolve it because they are lower in that priority list, and when we start to decline permits because we've reached the cap and we're knocking off from the bottom, the first lot that we would knock off is those with with garages. And if you have the small garage, you would miss out and challenge our ruling on that. And we need a process to be able to meet that challenge.
Second question is, thanks Moana for working on this, on the wording of the amendment. I'm not sure if it's Democracy Service or to you the question. You might disagree with this paper, but there is a notice of motion regards to the land behind the library, and about 8-9 people already signed. I'm expecting to get a signature, including from the mayor. It's going to be most likely a unanimous support for the idea. But if we pass this motion, the amendment that you said, do you think one of the article in this one, where it says up to half of that budget to go to for the library, will have impact because of this?
I mean, I think it's easier if we try and capture it today rather than sending us away to do a paper around notice of motion, which will take more time. The issue that we have is not an issue at all with the concept of using some of this money for that. It's just we don't know how much money we've got. And so we're kind of talking in the hypothetical about how much money we have available, and we need to do more work because this has only really been raised with me in the last couple of days. Yep. So we need to basically go away and do the work. What we have done is considered using this town centre money for Wadestown because that was part of the conversation and out of the desire for the community to want more traffic calming, which can be done through placemaking. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it needs to be an either or. As I said, we haven't necessarily identified budget, and that wouldn't change with a notice of motion. It would just mean, I don't know, Siobhan, it's your area, it would mean having to reprioritise other budgets, but that's why what I've tried to send to you in an amendment is just acknowledging that we don't know how much money we're talking about, which makes it very difficult to give you advice. But the risk with splitting the money in half is you end up with not enough money for either of them.
So, okay, that answers my second part of the question, which is the money issue.
Yep.
The land itself, can it just be used without this council passing any motion? And because you have money, you can't just go and put those things, and without traffic resolutions, without getting any guidance from this council, can you do that? Is there any possibility of doing that?
Well, I mean, it's got contractor parking there at the moment associated with the town centre. We'd need to go away and check, potentially.
Which I did check, and they don't have, I'm afraid. I don't want to get into it.
No. Yeah. So I know there's...
I don't think we can get too bogged down in this one but at the minute. But
what I can say, Councillor,
conversations
can happen. We very much heard you, and we can go away, and I'm happy to commit to go away and finding out those answers for you. I just can't guarantee we've got budget for it.
Okay. I think we have to move on, but Councillor Abdurrahman, you have raised a really interesting point, but we'll have to some conversations outside of this forum. I just had one question about Newtown, because this is the second of a scheme that we've rolled out, and I guess I like to be informed by monitoring and what's happening. So have you got any comments as to how the Newtown parking management scheme has rolled out?
Cool. Thank you, Chair. There was I responded to some Q&A specifically around and provided a bit of a table on that. You'll recall there that we approved a phase 1 and a phase 2. So phase 1 was our initial thoughts of the number of parks that might be needed, but we had committee agree to approve a phase 2, a second lot of restrictions that have been given approval to should we need them. And I'm pleased to say that at this stage, it doesn't look like we're going to need many or any of the phase 2 restrictions. The number of permits is in Newtown West sits at 66% of the permits are available that we could dish out. So about 2/3 of the have taken up the opportunity to park in there, which is a lot lower than I initially thought. So making me think that the residents in that area are still finding it acceptable to park in those unrestricted spaces and not finding the need to go and get a permit. What I didn't report through there was the number of people that initially applied for a permit and then within the first 4 to 6 weeks of the scheme asked for a refund because they didn't need it. So we cancelled a lot of permits. We fully refunded those. We thought in the interest of, rather than trying to take a little bit of money off them for the time they used it, we've just fully refunded. So we absorbed the processing of the permit. But so that's I guess, a sign that actually the scheme has worked well there. We're not aware of a great deal of enforcement. I temper that on that we are enforcing the area, so we're not just not going there and therefore not writing tickets. Our enforcement teams are out regularly and walking those streets looking at who's parking and not writing out excessive number of tickets. So again, that's showing that compliance is really good. Also to note, though, that we haven't yet removed parking from Rental Street. That's probably still another 4 to 6 weeks away, and we expect to see perhaps a little bit more of an influx in people taking up permits when that happens, as we displace vehicles from one side of the road from Rental Street. But we'll go back and give a letter to those residents reminding them how they can apply for a permit.
Would you say you've had very much feedback, either positive or negative, or has it been more radio silence?
Not much negative feedback, which was surprising, to be fair. It's gone down really well where it has. There's been a couple of minor issues, and I'll report back to that in committee, to this committee in the new year, as you requested a report back.
And can I just ask that the Q&A is tabled? Because I think there's a lot of work gone into that particular Q&A, and it'd be good to have it as part of the record. Are there any other questions? I have reached the end of our list. Okay, well, we do need to get on to debate at some point. Councillor Chung, you can bring up the rear with the questions.
Okay, just before I ask the rest of my questions, just a question on Newtown. I've had a message from the Mary Potter Hospice management about parking for their staff regarding Newtown.
Yeah. Can you email that one through, Councillor Chung?
Okay, right. Okay, so back to Wadestown. Can I assume that when you're talking about you haven't set the parameters or requirements for the definition of garages and sheds, would that the issue at 75 Wadestown Road, would that come into that category?
That would be one that we would need to assess. And I haven't assessed. I don't know whether it would constitute a garage or a shed. But yes, it is, it's likely to be one that we'd need to assess.
That's one we looked at when we walked
It is
around.
one we looked at, and there's the two issues. One was the size, and the other was its sight lines and the safety of using it. So we would assess it on both bases.
Great, thanks. Now, regarding, we've had some discussion about the boundary between east and west. The issues that we've had with Hanover, now, we talked a little bit about Hanover before. Now, Hanover, it narrows down as you get down to the end of the street. And so are we going to have two measurements, one for the narrow end of the street, or are we looking at making the whole street wide enough for a fire engine to actually come down? So looking at those guidelines about the width of the street.
Yeah, so the basis would be we would want we just want to adopt a 2.9 metre lane as being the standard, and the 2.9 metre lane we want to guarantee is all the way to the end of Hanover Street. Whether the road was wide enough to accommodate parking on one side, both sides, or not at all, would all be based around the width at the place.
Okay. Right, and the last question is regarding the parking in Fernhill Terrace. Now, you may recall that some of the submitters that came in, they were talking about they live in World Street, the bottom of the World Street, where they have no off-street car park. So they park in Fernhill Terrace and they walk down the sort of a little track to go down there. So the yellow lines that we're actually looking at for the bottom of Fernhill, would they still be implemented?
Yeah.
So again, we would, if the new dimensions were approved through this, we would ensure there was a 2.9 clear access for a fire appliance or an ambulance or whatever, and then we would then look to see what parking could remain outside of that 2.9. So I haven't made that assessment, but we would then we would apply that here.
Okay, so I think this is quite a tricky one because.
How brief can it be?
Very brief. I think this is quite a tricky one because those street houses at the bottom of World Street, where would a fire appliance access those houses if one of those houses was on fire? Do they actually, would we have to set the width for World Street, or do we set it for Fernhill Terrace? I'm not sure which way they would get there, because obviously they can't drive there.
Okay. I think we really are getting down to the detail with this one, Councillor Chung. Maybe you can, we're going to have a 5-minute break actually, and maybe you can satisfy yourself with a question there. Yeah, or do you have a quick answer? No, okay. So I am going to suggest a 5-minute break because I'm aware that there's an amendment that needs to be refined. But I think we could do with a 5-minute break. So we'll be back for the debate, please, at no later than, right, sitting down, ready to go at 11:45. I would like to be finished before lunch. the paper with great pleasure. I think that it's actually been a good example of where we've listened carefully to the community, and actually the site visit was very valuable for me in looking at where that cycleway was proposed and looking at the one we'd already installed up Wadestown Road, and actually thinking that it would be one we could afford to defer. Given that I know our budget for cycleways is going to be more limited going forwards, and I think we want to put the money where it's going to deliver really obvious value for people and be well received. I felt that this cycleway wasn't necessarily going to be any of those things right now, and it was fairly sensible to defer it. I do thank Councillor Calvert, Councillor McNulty, everyone actually, I'm starting to realise everyone's had a hand in this, for a really collaborative effort around the table to work out how we could best address the concerns of the community while honouring the policies that we have as a council to do the things that we've set out to do. So I actually think that's there's a good set of recommendations and amendments up there. Thank you, Councillor Abdurrahman, for changing yours, because I think I now can support it. I'm happy. I think I'm happy to support all of them as they stand. That's all I've really got to say. I think we've had a very, very robust discussion around this. And do I have a seconder? All right, lovely. Do you want to speak now or later?
This is going to be a paper where this council can't please everybody all the time. And I know in particular for my ward, there will be people happy with how I vote, and there'll be people who will be unhappy with how I vote. And that's the challenge that we have in balancing a lot of competing concerns and interests. But I thank my colleagues for working collaboratively on trying to find a solution. I think we've got to remember that this is also a bit of a pilot, a test case for a parking management plan for primarily a residential suburb. I know Newtown's gone in it with Berhampore. They're very closely connected. We're still learning about how that's working. So there are lessons to be learned, I'm assuming, from this, that can then be applied elsewhere around the city. And that's why really the suggestion there, and again, it won't suit everyone, is to do the east before the west. Because I think because this is a pilot scheme, that we should take the opportunity to learn from it. Officers have got the opportunity to push it the west in sooner if it's found that it's needed. But as we've seen with Newtown, where they've said that it's only 66% of the residential parking being taken up, I think we may well see things slightly different. And again, because the cycleway's been removed from Wadestown Village down to Blackridge Road, that again creates the some extra parking as well that didn't exist previously under the proposal. Now, there's one thing that, and this is where I think it's how do we make sure that the projects that we're doing in places actually encompass everything that's required. Now, for a number of years, Wadestown residents have been asking for traffic calming in the village, because of the speed of the traffic going through. But that was one thing that was missed from a transit-orientated project. I mean, I know there's a little bit in, but generally it wasn't the focus. So I think we need to take something from this and say, how do we make sure we encompass everything related? And so this is why, and I thank Councillor Abdurrahman for putting this in, and we might have a bit of a fight between Wadestown and Island Bay in terms of money, but this is something that's really has been asked for at least 8 years, as I know from as a councillor for the area, for traffic calming around the village, and that's about making sure that cars or bikes actually don't go faster than 30 k's an hour. So look, I asked you for your support. I know it's a 50-50 whether we delay the west side, but I think given this is a pilot, given this is encompassing a huge area, that put just a little bit of caution and just do one side first, learn from that, then do the second side. Thank you.
Lovely. So I think we've got Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just quickly, because I'll be leaving shortly, but I'll join online to vote. I think this has been a really collaborative paper and process. I'm always conscious of not island baying up a project in terms of councillors getting really into the weeds of directing specific streets. And even though there's quite a lot of amendments up there, I think they are quite high level, and we've avoided that sort of interplay of really starting to say, put a car park here, don't put one here, which starts to lead to dysfunctional projects. I want to just thank Councillor Calvert for a lot of work on leading up and being proactive on this. And, you know, I think the community meeting the other night, it was really apparent you had people asking, sitting next to each other, one saying there is no problem with commuter parking, and then the person beside them saying there is a problem with commuter parking. When you have that dichotomy in a room, you will never be able to get everyone on board with a project and have them all pleased. There was split views in the room, but I think by and large this is a pretty clear approach. I'll take the punt on the phasing. I do think it's potentially a bit dangerous, but I'm listening here to the ward councillor that will go with the east first and then have that variability for the west, putting trust in your hands, so to speak, Councillor Calvert. And just trying to think, look, there's a few little things as well. I just really want to call out Paul and your team for being so flexible. Things like we're retaining the parking for the guy with his garage in Cecil Street, you know, stuff down to that level of he came and spoke to us, he identified a problem, we went away and bespoke, made sure we addressed his issue. To the street whips thing, you know, Councillor Randall and I were thinking, we're going to have to look at some excavation budget for the sake of 10 centimetres, and I think this amended standard is just a really clever approach that ensures emergency vehicle access can get through, and I think that's the most critical thing left in this project, is that we cannot in any way, shape, there's no magic solution around emergency services access. We either let there be enough room for them to get through, or there is a problem. It's a really non-negotiable black and white that drives it. So really happy with how the final shape of this has taken form. And yeah, just again, thank you to the committee, thank you to the staff. I think we've landed in quite a good place. And personally, I do look forward to seeing utilisation across the bike network come to a point where we do look at whether the proposed bike connection is warranted in future, because we have such a high uptake and there is a clear present need to go to Ōtare Wilton. I can understand at the moment that is not the case, but aspirationally, I hope we have that in the future, but we'll leave that for, you know, a council in future from now. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora whānau. I think, again, officers are doing a great job in this space and a lot of compromises. And when it comes to the funding allocation, I don't think so. There is no intention from officers to make us fight the Councillor Calvert, and I don't usually fight other people's fight as well. So here is what I think. That genuinely there is a unused budget that can be used in this space until I come with an idea of that. Some of that budget to be used in Island Bay as well. And now they are even considering that one. And I think it comes from a genuine place, and that's something that amendment is going to address, even though I'm not going to support it because I want all the money to be used in local there. I really want to touch a bit base because this is interconnected regardless to the Island Bay one, and I received from businesses yesterday, today, and the whole week, to be honest, and about 50 of them. I met some of them, and they are really looking forward to that space to be utilized until we decide what to do with it. And it has been sitting for a very long time, and I'm hoping I don't have to do this notice of motion, which is ready in my hand, but I trust Moana. I will leave it in her hand until she just get back to me. Otherwise, we just take it from wherever it is. And thank you, officers, to you all.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. I have to say that Wadestown is the Wadestown Connections is the area where I've spent the most time since I've actually been in council talking to people, and I think, yeah, I must have talked to most of the people in Wadestown. First of all, I'd like to thank Paul and his team for the engagement that we've had. I feel that it's been very, very productive. I've enjoyed discussing even down to the minutiae of individual people who have concerns about how this is going to affect them. So just looking at the meetings that I've actually had in Wadestown, we've had 2 council meetings, 6 meetings, 6 constituency meetings. I've spent 2 mornings sitting on Blackbridge Road, freezing cold, 4 days of walking around Crofton Downs to find out where people actually go, where they meet. At the other meeting that we just had the other night, Monday night, it seemed to me to be very clear that we had a majority of people saying that parking was an issue and they didn't want things changed. So personally, I still feel that we have addressed most of these issues, and I think that we have covered a reasonable compromise on what to actually do in Wadestown East. But the feedback from that meeting has actually swayed me into thinking, addressing what issues these people have. Now, I think because of that meeting in Wadestown, I'm inclined to actually vote for more time to actually look at Wadestown East, even though I think that is actually a good compromise. But I need to address the feedback from constituents, and it was the Wadestown meeting that actually has swayed me that we still need to do more work on this. But this doesn't negate the fact that I think the engagement with Paul and the staff have been absolutely superlative, probably the best I've had since I've been in council. So thank you very much for that.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, just in regard to the overs and unders of project spends, I guess I wouldn't like to see us establish a trend of continuing to direct officers in how to manage their budgets at such a granular detail. I'm very happy just to support 7. It's an insignificant amount of money, really. I think, 20 has also just made it, in my view, even more confusing over a very small pool of money to be spent over multiple projects, and it's not entirely clear to me. But for the sake of expediency, I'll support it. But just in the future, I think it's better that we allow staff to manage project costs in a way that's appropriate and in the best interests of the finances in a more broad picture.
All right, anyone else? No. Now, these were all moved as an amended substantive, right? Just making sure, because Ben's left the room, and if you move or second, you're meant to be there, but that's okay. I think he is going to try and vote. So my right of reply. So there's a lot of great things said. Thank you to Councillor McNulty for remembering to thank the staff. My biggest failing is that I forget to thank the staff. I'm always very good at thanking my colleagues for agreeing with me or supporting things, but not the staff. I actually think you've done such a lot of hard work, and I know that goes back over several drop-in sessions, beautiful, boards for us to be really clear about what we're talking about. Really helpful to me because it's not my ward. The detail that you've got into and trying to address some of the sort of little quirky issues that have arisen, I've really appreciated. I know that you've been very, very, very engaged in this and been determined to kind of sort it out as best you can. And I think actually you've done a really good job. It's excellent news about the Newtown parking scheme having gone so well. As elected representatives, we're always a little bit nervous because we'll be the ones that will hear about it in the community if it doesn't work well. I've heard very, very little negativity about Newtown, so I'm not the ward councillor, but I live fairly ward adjacent, so I think I take that as a really good sign that actually we're on the right track with the stuff that we're doing. I'm happy to support the ward councillor because I know what it's like to live through a situation in your ward where you're doing something different and new, and I lived through that with the cycleways in the east, and anything that you can do to kind of reassure the community that you're not just dumping something on them and running away is helpful. So I think what we're saying here is we're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to make sure that we know what we're doing. We'll do the first bit, see how it goes. We'll keep an eye on it, and that will maybe inform how we roll out the second half. And I think that's a really good message to be able to give to a community, especially a community that's obviously had some concerns. I agree with the point that I think it was Councillor McNulty again, that when I went to the community meeting, there were people who expressed a variety of views, including that they needed this scheme, including that actually they really appreciate the cycleway we've put in and a little bit disappointed we're not getting the other one, but they could kind of understand. So there's always a big variety of views, and I think you're right, Councillor Calvert, you can never keep everybody happy, but if everybody's only just a little bit annoyed, sometimes that's the best you can do, and when you know you're doing something for the greater good as well. Lots of other really great things said. Councillor Abdurrahman, I think you've reached a good compromise there, and I would like to see some parking made available for the Island Bay Village, because we have taken away a lot of parking there, and it is right for us to do that because that's the main road and it needs to be safe for all users. But if we can find a painless way to compensate for some of that, that's all well and good. I think that's it from me. I look forward to seeing how it goes. It's going to be great. Do we have to take anything separately? Just 20. Okay. So we'll vote with everything except number 20. That's it. Okay with all of us? Okay. Okay. That's great. So everything. That is interesting.
Number 7 stands on its own. Yeah.
I believe 7 would stand on its own. So 20 would
As a refinement.
Would say how much is left over for Wadestown, and then what gets left over Wadestown is being directed by 7 as to how to spend it.
Okay.
So looking at.
Do we need to vote? And maybe we need to work our way down and actually vote for 7. Shall we vote for 7 now? See how it. Oh, 7's gone.
With 20.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I think so.
We just need to leave the meeting for that.
We can't have it inconsistent, so. Yeah. That's right. Good point. Thank you. Beg your pardon? Oh, I was waiting for it to be struck out. So we've now voted for everything without number 7, except 20, which we're now doing. So we're now taking 20. Which actually means if you don't vote for this, I don't know what happens to the money, so. Anyway, but that has passed. So thank you very much, everyone. I think that does actually bring us to the end of the paper. Once again, thank you to our staff. Thank you to Elise, who's always does such a sterling job. And we will, I believe, go to, have we got, no, we've got a couple of other things. We've got the decision, register, and upcoming reports. Shall we take that as read? Please do. Okay, please do. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rogers, lovely. And so we'll vote on that now. So we're voting on item 2.3. And that has passed unanimously. And with that, I'll read the final karakia and declare the meeting closed. Una hia, ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, I te ara takatu. Koe rā, I rongo, whakairia, aki ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia. Thank you, everybody.